I was still holding my dad's folded flag when my brother cleared his throat behind me. "Stick with me." We were standing barely 10 feet from my father's coffin. The room smelled like flowers and old wood. People were crying softly. The pastor hadn't even finished his prayer yet. My hands were shaking, but I told myself it was just the cold. Then Evan spoke. "Since Dad's gone, I'll be listing the house next week. I need the money." He didn't whisper. He didn't look at me first. He said it like he was talking about selling an old car, not the home we grew up in. A few people gasped. Someone dropped a tissue. I felt every eye turn toward me, like I was supposed to agree, or explain, or fight back. But I didn't say a word. Not we should talk about it. Not after the funeral. Just like that, my childhood home was already gone in his mind. The house where my mom used to hum while cooking. The roses she planted every spring, even when her hands hurt. The hallway where Dad marked our heights on the wall. Evan turned all of it into money he needed fast. My face burned. I felt small, like I was being scolded in public. I wanted to scream at him that this wasn't the time. That this wasn't his call. That Dad was still right there, lying between us. But I didn't. I looked at Evan instead. Really looked. His suit didn't fit right. His eyes wouldn't stay still. His jaw kept tightening, like he was bracing himself. That's when I realized something was wrong. He wasn't confident. He was scared. After the service, people hugged me and told me how strong I was. Evan stayed busy, talking too much, laughing at the wrong moments. He avoided my eyes. When I finally caught his glance, there was no sadness in it. Just pressure. Urgency. Like time was chasing him. We walked out to the graveside, and the wind picked up. I held the flag tighter and thought about how Dad always said to listen more than you speak when emotions are high. I remembered that advice clearly in that moment. So I stayed quiet. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of him. I didn't give him what he expected. Inside, something settled. Not anger. Not yet. Something calmer and heavier. A knowing. If Evan thought he could take everything while I stood there grieving, he had made a very big mistake. I wasn't ready to fight, but I was ready to pay attention. And that was where it started. I went back to the house alone the day after the funeral. Evan didn't come. He said he had things to handle. I didn't ask what things. I already knew. The house was quiet in a way that felt heavy. Not peaceful. Just empty. I stood in the doorway for a long time before stepping inside. The air smelled the same as always, cleaner, old wood, and a hint of coffee that no one had made. It felt like the house was holding its breath. I walked room to room slowly. The living room still had Dad's chair by the window. The carpet was worn in the same spots from years of pacing and sitting. My fingers brushed the wall where our heights were marked in pencil. Evan's line stopped early. Mine kept going. The kitchen hurt the most. Mom's kitchen was still frozen in time. Her old mixing bowl sat in the cabinet. The stove had a burn mark she never managed to clean. I could almost hear her humming while she cooked, always soft, always a little off-key. This was the room that raised me. This was where I learned how to be patient, how to fix things, how to stay. I sat at the table and cried there quietly. Not the loud kind. Just tears that came and wouldn't stop. After a while, I opened the drawer where Dad kept important papers. I wasn't looking for anything special. I think I just wanted to feel close to him. That's when I saw the folder with the house documents. I skimmed through them, half numb. Then something stopped me. My name was still there. I flipped through every page, slow and careful. There was no paper with my signature giving up my share. No agreement. No transfer. Nothing. I had never signed anything away. Ever. I leaned back in the chair, my heart beating harder now. I thought back to all the times Evan had pushed and taken. How he borrowed money and never paid it back. How he disappeared when Mom got sick. How he showed up only when something was being given away. I remembered Dad once asking me, quietly, if I trusted Evan. I had said, he's still my brother. Dad didn't argue. He just nodded. Grief was still there, heavy in my chest. But something else was growing beside it. Not anger. Not yet. It was steadier than that. Resolve. This house wasn't just wood and walls. It was proof. It was history. And it was partly mine. For the first time since the funeral, I felt myself stand up straight. I met Caleb Price 2 days later in his small office downtown. Dad had used him for years, and the walls were lined with old files and family photos. Caleb stood when I walked in. He didn't rush me. He didn't speak right away. He just nodded, like he understood why I was there. "I'm sorry about your father," he said softly. Thank you, I replied and sat down. At first, we talked about simple things. The funeral. The house. Then Caleb leaned back in his chair and folded his hands. His face changed just a little. There's something you should know, he said. He told me Evan had been borrowing money for a long time. Not small loans. Large ones. He had used the idea of a future inheritance to convince lenders he could pay them back. Caleb explained it slowly, like he didn't want to scare me, but it worked anyway. How much? I asked. Caleb named a number. Then another. Then another. Each one felt heavier than the last. It was far more than Evan had ever admitted. I thought about his shaking hands at the funeral, his rushed words. It all started to make sense. Can they take the house? I asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. He turned a folder toward me and opened it. Inside were copies of documents I had never seen before. Evan had promised things he didn't fully own. He had signed papers that danced around the truth without stepping fully into a crime. It sat in a gray space. Dangerous, but not clean. The will matters, Caleb said. And the timing matters. That sentence stayed with me. I realized then that Evan's rush to sell wasn't about grief. It was about pressure. People were waiting for their money, and he had nothing solid to give them. I felt sick thinking about how close he came to dragging me into his mess without even asking. He didn't warn me. He didn't protect me. He tried to use the house like a lifeline, even if it drowned me too. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I asked questions. Lots of them. What papers existed? What didn't? What my name was still attached to? Caleb answered everything carefully. When I stood to leave, he looked at me and said, "Take your time. Don't let him rush you." I nodded. On the drive home, I didn't call Evan. I didn't confront him. I didn't let him know what I had learned. I wrote everything down instead. Dates. Names. Numbers. If Evan was digging a hole, I wasn't going to jump in with him. I was going to stand back and watch closely. Caleb called me the next morning and asked me to come back in. His voice was calm but serious. I knew it wasn't a small thing. When I sat down, he placed a thin folder on the desk between us. It didn't look important at first. No bold labels. No red stamps. Just my father's name typed neatly on the front. "This is your father's updated will," Caleb said. I frowned. Updated. He nodded and opened it. The date caught my eye right away. It was from last year. After Evan had started gambling again. After the late-night calls. After the times Dad sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Caleb explained that Dad had come in alone. He hadn't told anyone. Not Evan. Not me. He was clear-headed, calm, and firm. He wanted things protected. He wanted the house safe. My chest tightened as I read. Dad had named me the executor. I stared at the page, sure I had misunderstood. "He never told me," I whispered. Caleb shook his head. He said he didn't want to put pressure on you. He trusted you to do the right thing when the time came. I felt proud and broken at the same time. Dad believed in me, but he also knew what was coming. He saw the storm before it hit. The will made one thing very clear. The house could not be sold without my approval. And Evan's share came with strict limits. Dad didn't cut him off, but he didn't leave him control either. "Does Evan know?" I asked. "No," Caleb said. "He thinks the older will still stands." My hands trembled as I closed the folder. This piece of paper changed everything. It also put a heavy weight on my shoulders. If I used it, Evan would see it as betrayal. If I didn't, Dad's wishes would be ignored. I thought about my brother, about how we used to be close, about how things slowly broke without either of us fixing them. I didn't want a war. I didn't want to hurt him. But I also thought about Dad. How careful he was. How he worked his whole life for that house. How he protected us in his own quiet way. That was the moment I understood something hard. This wasn't about choosing sides. It was about choosing what was right. I slipped the folder into my bag and stood up. I wasn't ready to show my hand yet. Evan didn't need to know. Not now. Dad trusted me to protect what he left behind. And I wasn't going to fail him. I didn't tell Evan about the will. I didn't mention the limits or my role. When he called a few days later, talking fast and acting relieved, I let him believe he was in control. "If selling is what we have to do, then fine," I said. He relaxed right away. His voice changed. He started talking like the house already belonged to him. He told me how lucky we were that the market was good, how fast everything would move once the papers were signed. He didn't ask how I felt. He didn't ask if I was ready. The more I agreed, the bolder he became. He stopped being careful with his words. He admitted he had promised money to people who were waiting. He complained about lenders and bad luck. Once he laughed and said, "Dad wouldn't even notice the paperwork." That comment stayed with me. Evan began sending me documents to review. I looked at them closely. Too closely. That's when I noticed something wrong. A signature that didn't match. Dates that didn't line up. Dad's name written in a way he never used. I didn't confront Evan. I thanked him and said everything looked fine. Behind the scenes, I kept copies of everything. One afternoon, I went to see Rose Whitaker. She lived 2 houses down from ours and had known my parents longer than anyone else. She made tea and listened while I spoke. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't need to. She told me how Dad had worried about Evan near the end. How he had talked about protecting the house. How he said he wanted me to be safe, no matter what happened. He was very clear, Rose said. He didn't want that house sold out of panic. Her words felt like a steady hand on my back. I asked if she would be willing to say that out loud if needed. She didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said. "For your father, yes." Evan grew more impatient as days passed. He pushed for quick decisions. He bragged about buyers. He pressured me to sign things faster. Each push made him sloppier. He didn't realize he was leaving a trail behind him. I stayed calm. I stayed quiet. I played the role he expected. The sister who was tired. The sister who just wanted it over. Inside, everything was lining up. Every lie. Every rushed move. Every forged line of ink. Evan thought he was winning. He didn't see the ground shifting under his feet. And by the time he noticed, it would already be too late. Evan called me early one morning, his voice sharp and excited. He said he had found a buyer who didn't want to wait. No listings. No open houses. Just a fast, quiet sale. "It's perfect," he said. "We sign, we close, and it's done." I told him that sounded fine. I said we should meet and go over everything together. He agreed right away. Too fast. We met in a small office near downtown. Evan arrived late, talking the whole time. He spread papers across the table like he was in charge. He kept pointing to where I needed to sign, tapping his finger hard, as if speed would solve everything. "This buyer won't wait," he said. "If we lose him, we're done." I nodded. I asked simple questions. I asked who prepared the documents. I asked why some dates were missing. Evan's answers didn't line up. He grew tense. His smile faded. Then the cracks opened. One document showed a signature that clearly wasn't Dad's. Another claimed consent I had never given. The buyer's name didn't match the bank letter attached. Evan brushed it off, saying paperwork was always messy. I told him I wanted everything reviewed first. Calmly. Slowly. That's when he panicked. He leaned back and rubbed his face. His voice dropped. He started talking about stress. About mistakes. About how hard things had been for him. Then he tried guilt. "You know I'm not a bad person," he said. "I did this for us." When that didn't work, he got angry. He accused me of stalling. Of not trusting him. Of trying to control things Dad never meant for me to handle. I didn't raise my voice. I took notes. I asked him to repeat things. I let him talk. Every word he said dug him deeper. Every excuse showed how desperate he was. At one point, he reached for my hand and said, "You're my sister. Don't do this to me." I gently pulled away. "This isn't personal," I said. "It's legal." That sentence ended the meeting. Evan stormed out, leaving the papers behind. I gathered them carefully and placed them in my bag. Outside, my hands were steady. Inside, my heart was pounding. He thought emotion would save him. He didn't understand that I wasn't fighting with feelings anymore. I was documenting facts. And facts don't bend when someone is desperate. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just the air, but the feeling. Everything echoed. Footsteps. Voices. Even breathing felt loud. Evan sat across the room from me, tapping his foot, unable to stay still. He wouldn't look at me. When the case began, the story Evan had told started to fall apart. His debts were listed one by one. Creditors. Lenders. Missed payments. Gambling records that showed how deep he had gone. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It was printed, numbered, and read out loud. People whispered. Evan's face went pale. Then came the documents. The forged signatures were shown clearly. Dates that didn't match. Claims of consent that never happened. The judge asked simple questions. Evan's answers were messy and rushed. He blamed stress. He blamed grief. He blamed everyone but himself. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly. My hands were steady. I didn't look at Evan. I looked at the judge. I spoke plainly. I explained what the house meant to my parents. I explained that I never signed away my share. I explained how the pressure came, little by little, always rushed, always urgent. I didn't insult Evan. I didn't raise my voice. I just told the truth. Caleb placed the updated will into evidence. The room went quiet. The judge read it carefully. The date. The limits. My role as executor. That changed everything. Rose Whitaker testified next. She spoke about my father's worries. About his clear wish that the house not be sold in a panic. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't angry. She was certain. Evan finally looked at me then. His eyes were wide. Not with sadness, but fear. He whispered my name, but I didn't respond. The judge leaned forward. Blood does not cancel the law, he said. With that, he froze the sale immediately. No signatures would move forward. No buyer could touch the house until everything was fully reviewed. Evan's control vanished in a single sentence. The sound of the gavel felt heavy, like a door closing. Outside the courtroom, Evan tried to speak to me. I didn't stop. I didn't need to. I felt tired, drained. But I also felt something else. Relief. The house was safe. Not because I fought harder, but because I stayed calm and let the truth stand on its own. In that room, family ties didn't matter. Only facts did. Evan showed up at the house one evening, just as the sun was setting. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he owned the place, which made me want to scream. But I stayed calm. I waited for him to speak first. You think you won, he said, his voice low. But it's not over. I didn't answer. I just watched him. He paced the living room, his shoes scraping the floor. Then he stopped and looked at me directly, the first time he really met my eyes in weeks. Fine, he said, almost angrily. You want the truth? I don't care about the house. Never did. I only care about the money. That's it. I stayed silent. My silence seemed to bother him more than anything. He tried to push harder. And you think you're better than me? You think you can just take everything Dad left and walk away clean? You're my sister, Lila. You owe me. I didn't flinch. I didn't give him the reaction he was hunting for. I just folded my arms. Don't make me regret trusting you, he continued, his voice sharp now. Don't think I won't come after you. You've seen what I can do. I finally spoke, calm and steady. Do you know why I never reacted before? Because I was listening. Listening to you, to Dad, to what really matters. And I realized something a long time ago. You've never cared about anyone but yourself. His face twisted with frustration, and I could see him trying to find a way to argue, to twist guilt into power. But I had waited years for this moment. The brother who left when Mom was sick. The brother who manipulated, lied, and left me to carry weight he refused to hold. All of that, I confronted it quietly, without shouting, without breaking. You've spent your life trying to make everyone else responsible for your mistakes, I said. Not anymore. You lost control the moment you chose money over family. You lost the right to scare me. He stared at me, open-mouthed, like he couldn't believe I had changed. And he hadn't. He didn't see it coming. For the first time, I realized the power had shifted. I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to him. He stormed out eventually, angry, defeated. I watched him go. The air felt lighter. The house was quiet again, but now it felt different. Safe. Mine. And finally, for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The day the court fully enforced Dad's will felt surreal. I sat in the same courtroom where everything had started weeks ago, but this time it was quieter, calmer. The judge read the final orders slowly, carefully, as if weighing each word. Evan's face went pale when the judge stated it clearly. He had no claim to the house. Every paper he had tried to forge, every attempt to pressure me, every lie he had told, none of it mattered anymore. The house belonged to me, just as Dad wanted. The judge continued, making sure it was understood that Evan was fully responsible for all his gambling debts. Not the house, not the inheritance, not anything tied to Dad's name. The decision wasn't punishment, exactly. It was protection. Dad had made sure the family home, the place he and Mom built, stayed safe. I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. The feeling was deeper, heavier than that. Relief mixed with a quiet sadness. Relief that the house was safe. Sadness because of all the years of betrayal, the lies, the secrets, and the time lost with my family. After the ruling, I walked slowly through the house. The light from the late afternoon sun spilled through the windows, touching the walls my parents had painted, the kitchen where Mom had hummed while cooking, the hallway where Dad had marked our heights. Everything felt alive again. Not because the house was mine, but because it was finally protected. I thought about Evan, about how his choices had left him alone. I didn't feel joy at his loss. I felt pity, maybe. He had made his decisions. I couldn't change them. And I thought about my parents, about how careful Dad had been, how he had planned this quietly, trusting me to do what was right. For the first time, I felt their presence in the house not as memory, but as guidance. I could feel their voices reminding me that protection and love mattered more than revenge. I walked to Dad's study and opened the window he had always kept slightly cracked. The wind moved through the room like a gentle breath. I closed my eyes and let it fill me. For the first time since his death, I allowed myself to release everything I had been holding: fear, anger, grief. The house wasn't just a building anymore. It was a memory, a legacy, a home where I could finally feel at peace. Not because I had won, not because Evan had lost, but because Dad's love had guided me through it all. And now, finally, it was safe. Evan left town quietly a few days after the final court ruling. He didn't pack much, just enough to get by, and he didn't say goodbye. I didn't expect him to. The truth of his mistakes had followed him, and there was nothing left for him here. Not money, not respect, not control. I watched him go from the porch, feeling a strange mixture of relief and emptiness. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was the calm that comes when chaos finally stops knocking on your door. The house behind me, with its peeling paint and familiar creaks, had survived everything. And so had I. I spent the next weeks fixing it. I painted the walls the same colors Mom had chosen. I replanted her roses along the walkway, even though the soil felt hard and dry. Each small task felt like stitching together pieces of my past. I cleaned the rooms, moved furniture, and hung up photographs of Dad and Mom, careful to place them where their presence would feel alive. Every corner I restored became a reminder that some things are worth keeping, no matter the cost. Evan's betrayal had left scars, but I refused to let it define me. I didn't want revenge that screamed. I wanted quiet, steady justice, the kind that doesn't humiliate, just exposes truth. He had lost more than the house. He had lost trust, reputation, and the chance to ever see this home as anything but something he couldn't control. Neighbors stopped by, offering help, sharing memories, and I realized how many people had quietly supported my family all along. Rose Whitaker came one afternoon with a tray of cookies, smiling softly. "You did what your father wanted," she said. I nodded, knowing she was right. As I stood in the kitchen one evening, the sun spilling through the windows, I let myself finally breathe. The house wasn't just walls and furniture. It was a record of survival, of lessons learned, and of love that could outlast greed. I didn't forgive Evan, and I didn't need to. Forgiveness wasn't the point. Strength was. Resilience was. And this home, full of memories and restored life, was my proof. For the first time in months, I felt whole. Not victorious, not bitter, just steady and free. The house stood as a symbol of everything my parents had built, and everything I would protect. I had lost nothing that mattered, and in that quiet truth, I found peace. This story shows the importance of knowing your legal rights and staying informed about family finances. Always review wills, inheritance documents, and property ownership carefully. Protecting your assets doesn't mean seeking revenge. It means understanding the law, staying calm, and acting wisely to safeguard your future and family legacy.